Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if the moment that broke him wasn't when she left? It was when she stayed exactly the same on the outside, but something inside her quietly stopped reaching for him. No dramatic goodbye. No angry messages. No begging. Just a softness that slowly became distance. And strangely, that silence often hurts a man far more than the fight he thought he wanted to escape. Because anger still feels like connection. Detachment feels like being erased. Tonight, I don't want to talk about why she detached. I want to talk about what happens inside him when he realizes she's no longer emotionally waiting. Not from the outside. From the place he'll probably never admit to anyone. The silence looks the same. Until it doesn't. The strange thing is, most men don't notice the moment she begins detaching. Not because they're careless. Not because they never loved her. But because emotional distance rarely arrives like a slammed door. It arrives like someone quietly closing a window in another room. The house still looks the same. Until one day you realize the air has changed. I think people imagine detachment as something obvious. They picture arguments ending. They picture blocked numbers. Long goodbye texts. A woman crying while packing her things. Sometimes that happens. But honestly, sometimes the most painful version is much quieter than that. She still says, drive safe. She still asks if you ate. She still laughs at something you send her. She still remembers your mother's birthday. From the outside, nothing is broken. Which is exactly why he doesn't see it. Because he's looking for explosions. She's already become silence. And silence doesn't always announce itself. It just starts occupying more space than either of them realizes. He actually feels relieved at first. That's the embarrassing part. He comes home after work. No difficult conversation waiting. No, can we talk? No, are you okay? No searching eyes trying to understand why he seemed distant yesterday. His nervous system mistakes the absence of emotional tension for peace. He tells himself, maybe we're finally figuring this out. Maybe they stopped overthinking. Maybe relationships naturally become calmer. Maybe this is what healthy feels like. He doesn't question it. Why would he? Most people don't question comfort when it first arrives. She notices he came home an hour late. She doesn't ask why. He notices that she doesn't ask. For maybe half a second. Then he shrugs it off. She must be busy. Or tired. Or maybe she's finally trusting me. That last explanation. He likes that one. It protects him from asking harder questions. A week later, he sends a message. She replies. Nothing unusual. Except, she doesn't ask him anything back. He stares at the conversation for a second longer than he normally would. Not because something happened. Because nothing happened. He can't explain why the chat suddenly feels empty. The words are there. The feeling isn't. So he closes the app. 5 minutes later. He opens it again. Not to text. Just to look. It's almost automatic. He doesn't even realize he's doing it. There are these tiny moments. They're almost too small to tell anyone about. You'd sound ridiculous trying. Like noticing she stops saying, "Good night, red heart," and simply writes, "night." Or she reacts with a thumbs up instead of sending 3 messages. Or she no longer sends photos of random things she sees during the day. A cloud. A dog sleeping in a grocery cart. Coffee that accidentally looked like a heart. Tiny things. Disposable things. Things he used to barely notice. Until they disappear. Then somehow, those become the things he misses first. Not the grand gestures. The ordinary evidence that someone was carrying you through their day. One evening they're sitting together watching television. Or maybe they're not really watching it. The show is on. Neither of them could tell you what happened in the last 20 minutes. She laughs. Not loudly. Just politely. The kind of laugh people give when they're being kind. He glances over. For 1 second. He almost asks, "You okay?" But he doesn't. Because asking that question feels strangely vulnerable. And honestly, he's afraid she'll say yes. Or worse, she's afraid she'll say no. So instead he asks something safer. "What do you want to eat tomorrow?" She shrugs. "Anything." Conversation over. Life continues. That's how these things happen. Not dramatically. Almost professionally. Like two people unknowingly helping each other avoid the truth. He still reaches for her hand. Sometimes. She still lets him hold it. That's what confuses him later. Because people assume detachment always looks cold. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes she still holds your hand. She just isn't reaching for yours anymore. There's a difference. A quiet one. Easy to miss. Impossible to forget once you finally see it. Months later, he'll replay moments like this. Painfully. He'll think, maybe that was when it started. No. Maybe earlier. No. It had to be after that weekend. Then another memory interrupts. Actually, she'd already stopped looking at him the same way before that. Memory becomes unreliable when regret gets involved. Everything starts rearranging itself. Every small interaction suddenly feels important. At the time, none of it did. There's another thing men don't admit very often. Sometimes when someone stops asking about your feelings, you don't feel abandoned. You feel relieved. At first. Because now you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to name emotions you barely understand. You don't have to admit you're overwhelmed. Or scared. Or confused. Or emotionally unavailable while secretly craving closeness. You can just exist. It feels easier. For a while. Until one night you realize nobody's knocking on that emotional door anymore. And somehow, that hurts more than the knocking ever did. He starts coming home to a quieter apartment. Not physically. Emotionally. She's reading more. Listening to podcasts with one earbud in. Watering plants. Making tea. Doing little things she never had time for before. He notices. Sort of. He tells himself. Good for her. And he means it. Mostly. But there's another feeling underneath it. Small. Annoying. Impossible to name. Why doesn't she need me to sit with her anymore? Why doesn't she call me into the kitchen just to taste the pasta sauce? Why isn't she showing me every funny video she finds? It shouldn't bother him. Honestly. He almost feels guilty that it does. Inner voice. Isn't this what you wanted? I don't know. You kept saying you needed space. I did. Now you have it. Yeah. Then why does the room feel bigger? He doesn't answer. Because he doesn't know. One Saturday morning he wakes up before she does. Or maybe she woke up first. It's hard to remember now. He walks into the kitchen expecting to find her making coffee. Instead, the coffee is already made. His mug is sitting there. Still warm. She remembered exactly how he likes it. 1 sugar. Just enough milk. Nothing is wrong. Nothing at all. Except, she isn't waiting in the kitchen anymore. She's already out on the balcony reading a book. He stands there holding the mug. Looking at her through the glass. She seems peaceful. Not distant. Not angry. Just. Complete inside her own mourning. And for reasons he can't explain. His chest tightens. Not dramatically. Just enough for him to notice. Then immediately ignore. He takes a sip of coffee. It's exactly how he likes it. That almost makes it worse. Because love is still there. It's just no longer reaching, no longer asking, no longer leaning. He tells himself he's imagining things. People settle down. People get comfortable. Relationships evolve. That's normal, isn't it? Maybe. Or maybe. This is what detachment looks like before anyone has the courage to call it by its name. And the hardest part? He doesn't realize she's already letting go. He thinks she's finally asking for less. He has no idea. She's simply stopped expecting more. At first, her detachment feels easier. The strange part is, for a while, he actually likes it. That's the piece almost nobody admits out loud. Because if he ever said it honestly, it would make him sound cruel. But it isn't cruelty. It's relief. Or at least, something that looks enough like relief that he mistakes it for peace. He doesn't wake up wondering if she's upset. He doesn't brace himself before checking his phone. There are fewer emotional conversations. Fewer pauses that stretch into, "Can I ask you something?" Fewer moments where she quietly studies his face, trying to figure out what changed. His shoulders relax. His breathing slows. He tells himself, "This is better." And maybe he believes it. For a little while. There is something about emotional closeness that can feel overwhelming to someone who doesn't always know what they're feeling. It's like standing under a light that's just a little too bright. You don't necessarily want to leave. You just keep squinting. When she was emotionally present, she noticed everything. You've been quieter lately. You smiled differently when your brother called. You seem tired. You keep saying you're fine. Sometimes he wanted to scream. "Can you please stop looking at me like that?" Not because she was wrong. Because she was often right. And being understood before you're ready to explain yourself can feel strangely exposing. So when she stopped asking, his first reaction wasn't sadness. It was exhaling. He starts spending more evenings doing his own thing. Scrolling. Watching sports. Playing a game. Working a little later than necessary. He notices she doesn't interrupt anymore. She doesn't come into the room just to sit beside him. She doesn't ask, "What are you thinking about?" At first, he enjoys the extra space. He would never call it freedom. That sounds too dramatic. But it feels close. Like loosening a shirt collar after wearing it all day. Comfortable. Necessary. Quiet. One Friday evening, he tells her he's going out with friends. She smiles. "Have fun." That's it. No. "What time will you be home?" No. "Who's going?" No playful jealousy. No teasing. Nothing. He actually appreciates it. Driving to meet his friends, he even catches himself thinking, "See, this is what trust looks like." The thought feels mature. Reasonable. He carries it around like proof that everything is getting healthier. Hours later, he's sitting at a noisy bar. Music too loud. Someone telling a story across the table. Everybody laughing. He laughs too. At least he thinks he does. Then he looks down at his phone. No missed calls. No message asking if he got there safely. No random meme. No come home soon. Nothing. He locks the screen. Puts it face down. Tells himself, "Good." 5 minutes later. He turns it over again. Just to check. Still nothing. He doesn't understand why a tiny disappointment sneaks into his chest. Wasn't this what he wanted? No pressure. No expectations. No emotional monitoring. Then why does silence suddenly feel personal? It's funny how quickly people get attached to things they claimed annoyed them. He used to joke that she texted too much. Now he notices exactly how little she texts. He used to say, "You don't have to tell me everything." Now he wonders why she stopped telling him anything. He used to feel crowded. Now, the space feels too wide. Inner voice. "You asked for less." "I know." "She gave you less." "I know." So why are you disappointed? Because I didn't think she'd actually stop. Silence. That answer stays with him longer than he expects. He starts noticing little gaps in his day. Not because she's gone. She's still there. That's what makes it confusing. She's physically present. Emotionally. She's become lighter somehow. Less attached to his reactions. Less invested in fixing every awkward moment. Dinner ends. She clears her plate. Kisses him on the shoulder. Goes to read. No checking whether he's okay. No circling back to conversations that felt unfinished. No emotional housekeeping. He tells himself she's just tired. Then he tells himself she's becoming more independent. Then, if he's honest, a tiny part of him wonders if she's slowly leaving without actually leaving. He pushes that thought away immediately. It feels ridiculous. The human mind has an incredible ability to ignore uncomfortable truths. Until the body starts noticing first. He begins waking up in the middle of the night. Not often. Just enough. He reaches across the bed. She's there. Sleeping peacefully. He feels relieved. Then strangely. Lonely. How can someone lying inches away feel so far? He doesn't have language for that. Most men don't. So instead he adjusts the blanket. Turns over. Falls back asleep. Or pretends to. One afternoon he sends her a photo. Nothing important. Just something funny he saw at work. Hours pass. Eventually she reacts with a laughing emoji. No follow-up. No. What happened after? No. That reminds me. Conversation finished. It should be enough. Objectively. It is enough. And yet, he stares at that single emoji longer than anyone should. He almost types. Busy. Deletes it. Almost types. Everything okay? Deletes that too. Instead, he sends nothing. Because asking would mean admitting he noticed. And he's not ready to admit that. Not even to himself. That's another thing pride does. It convinces people that pretending not to care somehow protects them. It doesn't. It just delays the loneliness until it becomes impossible to ignore. He starts lingering in doorways. Not consciously. He'll come home from work. Take off his shoes. Hear her laughing in another room during a phone call with her sister. He waits. Almost expecting her to come find him. She doesn't. She finishes her conversation. Eventually she walks out. Oh, you're home. A smile. A hug. Then, life continues. Nothing wrong. Nothing dramatic. Yet somehow, he misses being expected. Memory is strange. Once emotional distance begins, the brain starts collecting tiny evidence. He remembers a rainy Tuesday months earlier. She had waited by the window just to watch him pull into the driveway. She used to text. I saw your car. He thought it was cute. Maybe even unnecessary. Now, he parks. Walks inside. She has no idea exactly when he arrived. And she seems okay with that. He tells himself. That's healthy. His chest quietly disagrees. There are evenings when she sits beside him on the couch. They're physically close. Their knees touch. Their shoulders almost lean together. She scrolls through a book recommendation. He watches television. Neither says much. It's peaceful. Or maybe it's simply quiet. Those two things aren't always the same. He doesn't know which one this is. Inner voice. Say something. Like what? Anything. What if nothing's wrong? What if something is? He picks up the remote instead. Raises the volume. Conversation postponed. Again. He notices something embarrassing one Sunday afternoon. He's cleaning the kitchen. Not because he enjoys cleaning. Because he feels restless. He wipes the same countertop twice. Then a third time. Organizes the spice rack. Throws away expired coupons. Straightens shoes by the front door. He keeps moving. Because stopping means feeling. And feeling has become inconvenient. Halfway through folding dish towels, he suddenly realizes. He's waiting for her to notice. Waiting for her to walk in and laugh. Who are you, and what have you done with my boyfriend? She doesn't. She's outside watering plants with headphones on. He stands in the kitchen holding the same towel for almost a full minute. Then laughs at himself. Quietly. Embarrassed. No one talks about how grief sometimes begins before the relationship ends. Sometimes grief begins when your routines stop being shared. When she no longer says, "Come look at this." When she starts solving little problems without asking for your help. When she buys new curtains and forgets to ask your opinion. Not because she's trying to exclude you. Because she genuinely no longer needs your participation in every small moment. And that, for reasons he can't explain, stings. He still tells everyone they're doing well. Because from the outside, they are. No fighting. No chaos. No drama. Friends even comment. You two seem so peaceful. He smiles. Yeah. He believes it for about 3 seconds. Then something inside him whispers. Peace shouldn't feel this lonely. One night he wakes up thirsty. The apartment is silent. He walks into the kitchen for a glass of water. On the table sits her notebook. It's open. Not intentionally. The fan must have flipped it. He doesn't read it. He isn't that kind of man. But he notices one sentence before looking away. It isn't even a full sentence. Just 5 words. Learning to keep myself company. He freezes. Only for a second. Then looks away immediately, almost guilty for seeing it. He drinks his water. Returns to bed. Doesn't mention it the next morning. But those 5 words. They stay. Days later he's sitting in traffic, and they come back. While brushing his teeth. While buying groceries. While waiting for coffee. Learning to keep myself company. He wonders. When did she start learning that? More painfully. Why didn't I notice she had to? That's when the relief begins to crack. Not all at once. Just enough for the loneliness underneath to become visible. Because the space he thought he wanted is slowly becoming a place where she no longer waits for him to enter. And that realization doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives quietly. One ordinary day after another. Until he can no longer tell the difference between the peace he asked for and the distance he never meant to create. The habits he once avoided become the things he secretly misses. It doesn't happen because she says she's leaving. She doesn't. It doesn't happen after one big fight. Sometimes there isn't one. It begins on an ordinary Tuesday when he catches himself waiting for something. That never comes. Not a declaration of love. Not a dramatic apology. Just one of those small, ordinary things she used to do without thinking. Maybe it was the good morning text before he woke up. Maybe it was the random picture of the sky outside her office. Maybe it was, guess what happened today? Whatever it was. It used to arrive so consistently that he stopped noticing it. Now that it's gone, his brain notices its absence with almost embarrassing precision. The funny thing about human beings is that we rarely miss what we appreciated. We miss what we assumed would always be there. He used to read her long messages while walking into work. Sometimes he'd smile. Sometimes he'd think, I'll answer later. Later often became 3 hours. Sometimes 6. Occasionally. The next morning. Not because he wanted to hurt her. Life just felt busy. At least that's what he told himself. Now she's the one replying hours later. And suddenly, 3 hours feels like an eternity. He keeps checking the clock. She must be working. Her phone is probably on silent. She's probably driving. He invents explanations faster than he ever realized she used to. One afternoon, he sends her something that reminds him of her. A bakery posted a picture of cinnamon rolls. She loves cinnamon rolls. He sends it with no caption. Normally, she would have replied, "We're going there this weekend." Or, "You remembered." Instead, she simply reacts with a heart. Nothing else. He smiles anyway. Then waits. Maybe she's typing. Nothing. He puts the phone down. Picks it up again. Still nothing. He hates himself a little for caring this much. There's a strange humiliation in realizing you've become emotionally attached to something you once called too much. He used to think she overcommunicated. Now silence feels louder than all those messages ever did. He starts looking for little signs. Not consciously. Just. Automatically. Did she laugh the same way today? Did she look at me when she came home? Did she touch my arm when she walked past? Did she notice my haircut? He becomes an observer. Which is ironic. Because when she was paying attention to him, he often wished she'd stop analyzing everything. Now he's analyzing everything. Memory starts playing tricks on him. He's driving home after work. Traffic barely moving. The windshield wipers keep scraping across the glass. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. At a red light, he suddenly remembers one completely insignificant afternoon. She had been sitting in the passenger seat, singing terribly to a song on the radio. Off-key. Completely off-key. She caught him smiling. "What? You know none of the words." "I know enough. You literally made up half the chorus." "So?" He laughed. Really laughed. Not the polite laugh he gives coworkers. The kind that makes your stomach hurt a little. The light turned green. Cars behind them honked because neither of them noticed. At the time, it felt forgettable. Now, he can't stop replaying it. He wonders why. Out of every memory they shared. Why that one? Maybe because grief doesn't collect grand moments. It collects evidence that ordinary life used to feel warmer. He starts checking whether she texted first. Not every day. Just enough to notice a pattern. Monday. No. Tuesday. No. Wednesday. No. By Friday he almost sends, "Everything okay?" Instead he sends, "Hope work wasn't too stressful today." She replies, "Thank you, it was okay." That's all. The conversation ends before it even begins. Inner voice. She answered, "I know. Then what's bothering you?" She didn't stay. Maybe she's busy. Maybe. Do you believe that? Sometimes. There's another awkward truth. He starts manufacturing reasons to interact with her. Not because he has something important to say. Because he wants to see if she'll respond the way she used to. He asks where she bought a certain coffee. Even though he already knows. He sends her a meme that isn't even very funny. He points out something on television just to hear her opinion. It's subtle. Almost childish. Little emotional fishing lines thrown into quiet water. Sometimes she bites. Sometimes she smiles. Sometimes she says, then goes back to her book. He can't explain why one syllable can ruin his whole evening. She hasn't become rude. That's what makes this difficult. If she were angry, he'd know what to do. If she yelled, he could defend himself. If she cried, he could comfort her. But calm detachment offers no obvious solution. There's nothing to fix. Nothing to argue against. Nothing to apologize for. Only distance. Measured in inches instead of miles. One night they're getting ready for bed. He brushes his teeth while she washes her face. The mirror is fogged from the shower. He watches her reflection wipe moisturizer onto her cheeks. Months ago, she would have started talking about something random. A coworker. A podcast. A weird dream. Now, the bathroom is almost silent except for running water. He wants to say something. Anything. Instead he asks, "Did we run out of toothpaste?" She looks at the tube. "I bought another one." "Oh." Silence again. He almost laughs. Not because it's funny. Because somehow toothpaste became the longest conversation they'd had all evening. He notices she's become harder to interrupt. Not because she's ignoring him. Because she's genuinely occupied with her own life now. Reading. Learning. Calling friends. Going for walks. Trying new recipes. Listening to audiobooks while folding laundry. She seems full. Not overflowing with happiness. Just. No longer emotionally waiting for him to fill every empty space. That realization unsettles him more than he expects. He remembers something she used to say. Years ago. Not dramatically. Just one afternoon while cooking dinner. "I like telling you everything." He had smiled. "Everything. Almost everything. What don't you tell me?" She laughed. "If I tell you that, then I'd be telling you everything." Back then. He barely thought about that conversation. Now he suddenly wonders. When did she stop wanting to tell him everything? More painfully. What replaced that instinct? His habits begin changing in strange ways. He starts getting home earlier. Not because anyone asked him to. Because maybe she'll still be awake. Maybe they'll eat together. Maybe tonight will feel like it used to. Some evenings. She already ate. Not to make a point. She simply got hungry. "You should have called me. I didn't know when you'd be home." Oh. He's the one who taught her not to wait. Now he's surprised she listened. The mind does this strange thing when regret is forming. It edits the past. Suddenly all the moments he considered interruptions become invitations. The time she wanted to sit beside him while he watched television. The afternoons she asked if he wanted to take a walk. The nights she wanted to stay up talking even though they both had work the next morning. Back then, he often chose efficiency. "I'm tired. Maybe tomorrow. I've got emails." None of those answers were lies. But together, they built something he never intended to build. A woman who slowly learned how to stop asking. He opens old photos one evening. Not because he's sentimental. That's what he tells himself. He's looking for one specific picture. He scrolls. Vacation. Birthday dinner. A blurry selfie at a gas station. A picture of pancakes she made that accidentally burned. He laughs. He forgot about the pancakes. Then he notices something else. In almost every picture, she's looking at him. Not the camera. Him. He zooms in. Feels ridiculous for doing it. Still. He keeps looking. When did she stop looking like that? He honestly doesn't know. Inner voice. Call her into the room. Why? Because you miss her. She's literally in the next room. Exactly. One evening he hears her laughing. Really laughing. From another room. She's talking to a friend on speakerphone. The sound catches him off guard. For a second, he smiles automatically. Then something unexpectedly heavy settles in his chest. He realizes. He hasn't heard her laugh like that with him in weeks. Maybe months. Not because she doesn't want to. Because they haven't created moments where it could happen. That's a painful distinction. Love doesn't disappear overnight. Sometimes. Shared laughter does first. He almost knocks on the door. Just to join the conversation. He doesn't. It feels intrusive. So instead he walks into the kitchen. Opens the refrigerator. Closes it again without taking anything. Drinks water he wasn't thirsty for. Wipes a clean countertop. Anything to explain why he's standing there feeling strangely left out in his own home. The hardest memories are never the dramatic ones. They're the ones that reveal what intimacy actually looked like before anyone knew it was disappearing. Her reaching for his hand at red lights. Saving the crispy fries for him because she knew he liked them. Sending him pictures of dogs she saw on her lunch break. Asking whether he wanted the last slice of pizza, even though she clearly did. Tiny things. Ridiculously tiny things. And yet, those tiny things were the language of closeness. He just didn't know he was fluent in it until it stopped being spoken. He keeps searching for the old version of her. Not because she became someone else. Because she became someone who stopped extending herself quite so far. He wonders if she's changed. The truth is harder to accept. Maybe she didn't change nearly as much as he thinks. Maybe she simply stopped carrying the emotional weight for both of them. And now, for the first time, he can actually feel how heavy that weight was. Not because she told him. Because she's finally put it down. The heart often understands what the ego refuses to admit. The mind is an incredible negotiator. Give it enough uncertainty, and it can explain almost anything away. She's just tired. Work has been stressful. People settle into routines. Not every relationship needs constant conversation. The mind loves explanations. It collects them the way people collect old receipts, most of them unnecessary, but strangely comforting. The body. The body is less interested in stories. It pays attention to patterns. To tension. To absence. To what no longer feels the same. Long before he consciously admits something is changing. His body already knows. He starts waking up 3 minutes before his alarm. Not because he slept well. Because his sleep has quietly become lighter. He reaches for his phone before his eyes are even fully open. No message. No notification. He isn't waiting for anything specific. He just feels the need to check. The screen lights up. 6:14 a.m. Nothing. He locks it. Places it back on the nightstand. 30 seconds later. He checks it again. As if something important could have happened in half a minute. He laughs at himself. Just once. Then keeps doing it anyway. He becomes restless in ways that don't make sense. He's sitting in a meeting. Someone is presenting quarterly numbers. Everyone around the table seems focused. He's looking at the screen. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he's wondering if she made it to work safely. That thought surprises him. Months ago, she would have texted. Made it. Now she doesn't. Not because she's trying to punish him. Because somewhere along the way, she stopped assuming he needed to know every small part of her day. He tries to focus on the meeting. Instead, he catches himself unlocking his phone beneath the table. Still nothing. He slips it back into his pocket before anyone notices. His body already feels the disappointment. His mind hasn't found words for it yet. There are evenings when he walks through the front door carrying the weight of an ordinary day. Traffic. Emails. Deadlines. Noise. He used to feel something shift the moment he came home. Not because life became perfect. Because she had a way of noticing him. Sometimes she'd look up from the couch. There you are. Sometimes she'd ask. Long day. Sometimes she'd simply smile. Those moments were tiny. 5 seconds. 10 maybe. But they acted like emotional landing strips. A place for his nervous system to slow down. Now. He opens the door. She's there. She smiles. Hey. Then continues reading. Nothing is wrong. Nothing feels hostile. And yet, his shoulders stay tense. He doesn't understand why home suddenly feels harder to arrive in. The body remembers emotional safety long after the mind forgets how to describe it. He begins pacing. Without realizing it, he'll walk into the kitchen. Open the refrigerator. Close it. Walk into the living room. Sit down. Stand up again. Look out the window. Check the weather. Pick up his phone. Put it back down. He tells himself he's bored. Maybe. Or maybe anxiety rarely introduces itself by name. Maybe it disguises itself as restlessness. One Saturday afternoon, he decides to clean the garage. The garage doesn't need cleaning. Not really. But moving boxes feels easier than sitting still. He reorganizes tools. Throws away old receipts. Finds an extension cord he'd forgotten existed. Hours pass. Sweat runs down his back. His muscles ache. Physically, he feels productive. Emotionally, something still won't settle. He goes inside for water. She's sitting on the couch with a blanket over her legs. Reading. Peaceful. She smiles when she sees him. You've been out there forever. Yeah. Looks nice. Thanks. Conversation over. He stands there another few seconds. Almost waiting. Waiting for what? He honestly doesn't know. Maybe for her to ask him to sit down. Maybe for her to tell him about her book. Maybe just to need him. Instead, she returns to reading. He nods to himself. Walks back outside. The garage suddenly feels much quieter than before. Inner voice. Why are you disappointed? I'm not. Then why didn't you leave? I was just standing there. Waiting. Maybe. For what? I don't know. But he does. He was waiting to feel chosen. The human nervous system notices consistency. When consistency disappears, it begins searching. That's why he starts looking at her more often. Not openly. Quick glances. Across dinner. Across the room. In the reflection of the microwave while she's making tea. She's still beautiful. That's not what surprises him. What surprises him is how self-contained she looks. She hums while chopping vegetables. She waters plants without calling him over. She laughs at a podcast through one earbud. She exists comfortably inside her own company. Months ago, she constantly invited him into her moments. Now, she simply lives them. He keeps thinking something is missing. He just can't identify what. Until one evening, they're walking through a grocery store. Completely ordinary. She reaches for cereal. He grabs coffee. She asks if they need eggs. He says yes. Everything feels normal. Then he realizes. She hasn't touched him once. Not his arm. Not his shoulder. Not the small of his back while passing behind him. Nothing. The realization hits him so suddenly that he almost stops walking. Not because physical touch disappeared. Because he never noticed how often it used to happen. Now his skin notices before his thoughts do. He remembers something ridiculous. She used to steal fries from his plate. Every single time. He'd pretend to complain. You ordered your own. I know. Then eat yours. They taste better from your plate. It became a joke. Predictable. Comfortable. Now they're eating lunch together. His fries remain untouched. She never reaches across the table. Halfway through the meal, he pushes the basket toward her. You want some? She smiles politely. No thanks. He nods. The conversation moves on. But inside, something quietly breaks. Because suddenly he understands. She isn't refusing fries. She stopped assuming what's yours is automatically hers. That tiny shift says more than either of them ever could. The body reacts in strange ways to emotional uncertainty. His appetite changes. Some days he forgets lunch completely. Other days he eats mindlessly. He pours coffee he never finishes. He watches half a movie without remembering the plot. He scrolls through social media for 40 minutes and absorbs almost nothing. His attention keeps returning to the same invisible question. Where did we go? Not. Where did she go? Where did we go? He starts noticing sounds. The apartment has always had them. The washing machine humming. The kettle boiling. the floor creaking near the hallway. But now, he notices something else. Silence between those sounds. The silence where conversations used to live. The silence where she used to narrate her day. The silence where he used to absent-mindedly answer. MHM. Without realizing those conversations were stitching their lives together. He misses conversations he barely listened to. That realization fills him with shame. One night he hears her crying. Very quietly. The bathroom door is closed. He's walking down the hallway when he hears a muffled breath. Not sobbing. Not dramatic. Just someone trying not to cry loudly. His hand reaches toward the doorknob. Then stops. Maybe she's okay. Maybe she's just emotional. Maybe she'll tell me if she wants to. He waits outside. 30 seconds. 40. A minute. The water turns on. By the time she comes out, she's smiling. You okay? Yeah, just tired. He nods. Okay. That's it. He lets her walk past. Hours later. Lying awake in bed. His stomach twists. Not because she cried. Because she cried without coming to him. That thought settles somewhere deep inside his chest. Somewhere words can't easily reach. Inner voice. Go ask her. It's too late. Then ask tomorrow. What if she says nothing happened? What if something did? Silence. The ceiling suddenly feels very far away. He begins checking whether she's online. He hates this habit. It feels immature. Teenage. Unlike him. Still. He notices when the little green dot appears. He notices when it disappears. He notices she was active 15 minutes ago, but didn't respond to his message. Immediately. His mind begins writing stories. Maybe she's talking to someone. Maybe she's busy. Maybe she forgot. Maybe. He catches himself. Closes the app. 5 minutes later. Opens it again. The body is searching for reassurance faster than logic can keep up. There is a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from standing beside someone whose emotional world no longer automatically reaches toward yours. That's what he feels now. Not abandonment. Not rejection. Just an invisible gap. One that keeps widening by fractions of an inch. Every day. Then one evening. It happens. Nothing dramatic. She's asleep beside him. The room is dark except for streetlights slipping through the curtains. He watches her breathe. Steady. Peaceful. He realizes something that makes his chest physically tighten. If she left tomorrow, he honestly wouldn't know when she stopped needing him. He knows when she stopped texting first. He knows when she stopped asking where he was. He knows when she stopped filling every silence. But he doesn't know. Which moment finally convinced her she had to carry herself instead. That realization lands in his body before it reaches his mind. His throat feels tight. His breathing becomes shallow. His chest feels strangely heavy. For the first time. He doesn't want another explanation. He doesn't want another excuse. He doesn't want to tell himself she's simply tired. Because his body has already accepted a truth. That his pride has been postponing for months. Love doesn't always disappear in a single conversation. Sometimes. It slowly withdraws from the places it no longer feels invited. And before his mind can admit that she's emotionally slipping away. His body has already begun mourning someone who still sleeps only inches from his side. The hardest conversations are the ones no one else can hear. There comes a moment in almost every emotional loss. When the battle stops being between two people. And starts happening inside one. By now. Nothing dramatic has happened. She hasn't packed a suitcase. She hasn't slammed a door. She hasn't told him she doesn't love him anymore. From the outside. Life still looks almost exactly the same. They wake up together. They eat dinner together. They occasionally laugh. Friends still assume everything is fine. Even he keeps telling himself, "We're okay." But something inside him has become unbearably noisy. Because once the body notices, the mind can no longer stay comfortably asleep. It starts with questions. Tiny ones. Questions he never used to ask. Why didn't she tell me about her meeting? When did she start going for walks alone? Why didn't she ask if I wanted coffee? Each question feels insignificant, almost childish. So he pushes them away. But questions have a strange habit. Ignored ones rarely disappear. They multiply. One evening he's driving home. Traffic crawls through endless red lights. Normally he listens to sports radio. Tonight, he turns it off. The silence inside the car feels louder than the commentators ever did. Without distractions, his thoughts finally catch him. Maybe you're imagining this. He nods. That feels reasonable. She's still here. Exactly. You're overthinking. Probably. Then another voice quietly interrupts. Then why does your chest feel different every time you walk through the front door? He grips the steering wheel a little tighter. No answer. For years, he believed logic would solve almost everything. If something broke, fix it. If something needed attention, handle it. If emotions became complicated, wait long enough and they'll calm down. That strategy worked surprisingly well. Until it didn't. Because emotional distance isn't a flat tire. It isn't something you notice immediately. By the time you finally admit it's there, you've usually been driving on it for miles. He starts replaying conversations. Not arguments. Normal conversations. The kind he never thought mattered. She once asked, "Do you want to come with me to the farmer's market on Saturday?" He answered without looking up from his laptop. "I've got too much work." She smiled. Okay. That was it. Nothing dramatic. A week later, she went alone. Months later, she never asked again. Sitting in traffic now, he suddenly remembers her standing by the door with her car keys. Waiting. Not begging. Just waiting long enough to see if he might change his mind. He didn't. At the time, it felt insignificant. Now, it feels like a crossroads he never even noticed crossing. Inner voice. You didn't do anything wrong. I know. You were working. I was. You had responsibilities. Yes. Then why does that memory hurt? Because I think she wanted me more than she wanted the market. Silence. He swallows hard. This is where regret becomes complicated. Because regret isn't always about cruelty. Often, it's about realizing that good intentions don't erase repeated absence. He never intended to make her feel alone. He simply assumed there would always be another Saturday. Another dinner. Another conversation. Another chance. That's the dangerous thing about love that feels stable. It convinces you tomorrow is guaranteed. He begins noticing contradictions inside himself. When she texts him quickly, he feels relieved. When she doesn't, he tells himself she deserves her own life. When she spends time with friends, he's happy for her. Then unexpectedly, jealous. Not of another man. Of the version of her they now get that he no longer does. He hates admitting that. It sounds selfish. Maybe it is. But loneliness often reveals parts of ourselves we'd rather never meet. He's folding laundry one Sunday afternoon. A task he usually avoids. She walks through the room carrying a basket. She thanks him. Smiles. Keeps walking. He watches her disappear down the hallway. Something inside him whispers. She would have kissed you before. Would she? Or is memory exaggerating again? He honestly can't tell anymore. That's the problem. When relationships begin changing quietly, you start questioning your own recollection. Was she always this independent? Or did she become this way? Did I miss the transition? Or did I help create it? That afternoon, he opens an old text thread. Not to spy. Not to torture himself. At least. That's what he claims. He scrolls back months. Then further. There she is. Paragraphs. Stories. Pictures. Questions. Good morning messages. Good night messages. Tiny observations. This cloud looks like a whale. The cashier reminded me of your dad. Guess what happened on the train? He smiles. Then keeps scrolling. Somewhere. Without realizing exactly where. The paragraphs became sentences. The sentences became emojis. The emojis became reactions. The reactions became silence. He stares at the screen for a long time. Not because she's changed. Because the evidence is sitting right there. A timeline of someone gradually speaking less. To someone who gradually listened less. He closes the phone. Immediately opens it again. As if maybe. This time. The ending will be different. Inner voice. Call her. She's upstairs. Then go upstairs. What do I even say? Tell her you miss her. That sounds pathetic. Does it? He doesn't answer. Because pride has convinced him that vulnerability is weakness. Even though loneliness is already proving otherwise. He starts inventing imaginary conversations. While showering. While shaving. While standing in line for coffee. In his head. Everything comes out perfectly. I've been thinking about us. I know I haven't always been present. I don't want to lose what we have. In his imagination. She understands immediately. They hug. Everything softens. Reality isn't nearly that simple. Because speaking those words means admitting that he has been wrong. And being wrong isn't what frightens him most. Being too late does. One night they're watching a movie. Halfway through. He realizes he hasn't followed the plot at all. She's sitting beside him. Wrapped in a blanket. The television flickers across her face. He looks at her instead. She laughs quietly at something on the screen. He smiles without knowing why. Then a painful thought arrives. When was the last time I actually looked at her? Not glanced. Looked. Studied her expression. Watched the way she laughed. The tiny line that appears beside her eye. The way she tucks one foot beneath herself on the couch. He can't remember. How many evenings had they spent inches apart? While living in completely separate worlds. Psychologists sometimes talk about selective attention. We notice what our minds decide is important. For a long time, he believed the relationship itself was secure. So his attention shifted elsewhere. Work. Bills. Responsibilities. Goals. He never consciously stopped seeing her. He simply stopped actively noticing her. Now, his attention has nowhere else to go. And suddenly, he sees everything. The new book she's reading. The different perfume she started wearing. The playlist playing softly from her phone while she cooks. The plants she repotted last weekend. The haircut she got 3 days ago. He compliments it. She smiles warmly. Thank you. Then continues chopping vegetables. Months ago, she would have asked. You just noticed? Now, she simply accepts the compliment. No expectation. No teasing. No disappointment. That somehow hurts even more. The arguments inside him become louder. Maybe she's happier now. I want her to be happy. Then why are you upset? Because. Because what? Because I don't think I'm part of that happiness anymore. The kitchen suddenly feels smaller. He grips the edge of the counter until his knuckles turn pale. That night he lies awake beside her. She falls asleep quickly. He doesn't. His mind begins creating impossible timelines. What if he'd gone to the farmer's market? What if he'd answered more messages? What if he'd put his phone away during dinner? What if he'd asked one more question? What if he'd listened instead of fixing? What if? What if? What if? Regret always believes the past is editable. Reality never agrees. Around 2 in the morning, he quietly gets out of bed, walks into the living room. The apartment is wrapped in darkness. He sits on the couch without turning on any lights. Outside, a car passes. Somewhere in another building, a dog barks once. Then silence. He rests his elbows on his knees. For the first time in months, he allows himself to think a sentence all the way through. Not halfway. Not softened. Not explained away. Completely. I think I'm losing her. The words don't feel dramatic. They feel terrifyingly ordinary. Because no one else is there to hear them. No one argues. No one reassures him. The room simply accepts the truth. He feels tears gathering unexpectedly. He blinks them back. Not because men don't cry. Because he still isn't sure whether he deserves to. Then another realization quietly follows the first. One that's even harder to face. He has spent months asking himself the wrong question. Not, why is she changing? But, what happened inside her while I assumed everything was fine? Those are completely different questions. The first protects his ego. The second demands accountability. And accountability is uncomfortable. Because it doesn't require villains. Only honesty. He remembers something she once said almost casually while they were washing dishes. I don't need you to solve every problem. He smiled. What do you need then? She had answered so softly he almost missed it. I just need to feel like we're in the same room. At the time, he thought she meant physically. Standing together. Cooking together. Watching television together. Now, months later, sitting alone in the dark, he finally understands. She was never talking about the room. She was talking about emotional presence. About attention. About feeling accompanied instead of merely accompanied by someone's body. And suddenly, every quiet evening, every distracted dinner, every maybe tomorrow, every delayed reply, every conversation interrupted by a glowing phone screen, begins arranging itself into a picture he can no longer ignore. The argument inside him ends. Not because he has solved anything. Because one voice finally becomes louder than all the others. The voice that simply says, stop defending yourself. Start seeing her. For the first time, he isn't arguing with his loneliness anymore. He's listening to what it has been trying to tell him all along. The woman he once thought was seeking his approval has quietly learned to trust her own. There is a particular kind of fear that doesn't arrive with raised voices. It doesn't announce itself through dramatic exits. It doesn't begin with an argument. It begins the first time he realizes. She made an important decision. Without asking what he thought. Not because she's angry. Not because she's trying to prove a point. Because somewhere along the way, his opinion stopped being the place where she searched for certainty. At first, he barely notices. She comes home with a new haircut. Not radically different. Just shorter. Softer around her face. He looks up from his laptop. You cut your hair. She smiles. I did. It looks nice. Thank you. Then she walks into the bedroom. Conversation over. A few minutes later. Something feels strange. Months ago, she would have asked, do you really like it? Does it make my face look round? Should I have gone shorter? She would have laughed nervously while waiting for his answer. Now, she simply thanked him. Not because she didn't care. Because she'd already decided she liked it. His opinion became appreciation. Not permission. That small moment stays with him much longer than it should. He can't explain why. It's just a haircut. Isn't it? But deep down, He knows it isn't about hair. It's about confidence. About watching someone slowly stop outsourcing their sense of self. He remembers a conversation from years earlier. They were shopping for a winter coat. She tried on 3 different ones. Each time she walked out of the fitting room, the first place her eyes landed was him. What do you think? This one? Or the blue? You don't like this one? She laughed every time he shrugged. Changed again. Asked again. Back then, he secretly found it exhausting. Why can't she just choose? Now, he walks past a chair one evening and notices a shopping bag. Inside, a beautiful camel-colored coat. He'd never seen it before. When did you buy that? Last weekend. Oh, it's warm. It looks good. Thanks. She folds it neatly into the closet. No explanation. No need for reassurance. Just a woman who trusted her own judgment. He should feel proud. Part of him does. Another part feels strangely unnecessary. Inner voice. This is healthy. I know. Isn't this what you always wanted? Maybe. Then why does it hurt? Because there is a difference between wanting someone to become independent and realizing they no longer lean on you. He begins noticing how often she solves problems before mentioning them. The sink starts leaking. He comes home expecting to fix it. It's already taken care of. You called someone? Yeah. When? This morning. He nods. Good. Outwardly, nothing about the conversation seems unusual. Inside, he feels something quietly shift. There was a time she would have waited. Not because she couldn't solve it herself. Because solving things together made her feel connected. Now, efficiency has replaced togetherness. He realizes she has stopped waiting for him. Not just with plumbing. With life. One afternoon she mentions that she signed up for a photography class. He smiles. Really? Yeah. When does it start? Next Thursday. That's great. She smiles brightly. It'll be fun. He genuinely means it when he says, I'm happy for you. And he is. But as the conversation ends, a question slips into his mind. Why didn't she tell me before she signed up? Not because he needed control. Because once upon a time, planning things together was part of feeling like a team. Now, she informs him. She no longer consults him. The difference is subtle, yet impossible to ignore. For years, he misunderstood something. He thought she constantly asked for his opinion because she lacked confidence. Looking back, he begins seeing another possibility. Maybe she wasn't asking because she doubted herself. Maybe she was asking because she wanted to include him. Maybe what do you think? Was really another way of saying, I want you inside my world. And every distracted answer. Every absent-minded shrug. Whatever you want. Quietly taught her. She could build that world without him. The realization settles heavily inside him. Saturday morning. They're drinking coffee in the kitchen. She scrolls through something on her phone. He notices her smiling. What are you looking at? My photos from yesterday. You already went out? Yeah, sunrise. He blinks. By yourself? MHM. How was it? Amazing. She turns the phone toward him. The pictures are beautiful. Golden light over the lake. Birds lifting from the water. Empty benches. Morning mist. You took these? She nods proudly. They're really good. Thank you. He studies the photographs. Then something quietly stings. She experienced an entire beautiful morning, without once wishing he had been there. Or perhaps, she did wish it once. Long ago. Enough times. Until eventually, she stopped asking. He keeps remembering little moments differently now. Memory has changed its angle. Years ago, she used to ask if he wanted to watch sunsets, take late-night drives, walk after dinner, visit bookstores, browse antique markets, tiny adventures. He often declined. Not because he disliked them, because there would always be another chance. Now, she still does all those things. She simply does them with herself, or friends, or quietly alone. The activities never disappeared. Only the invitations did. Inner voice. You taught her this. I didn't teach her to leave me out. No. You taught her how to stop waiting. He closes his eyes. That sentence refuses to leave. One evening, she laughs while reading comments beneath one of her photographs online. He looks over. People really like them. She grins. I guess they do. You should keep posting. I think I will. There was a time. She would have asked, do you think they're good enough? Now, she's already moving forward. Validation has become encouragement, not necessity. He suddenly realizes. She's building confidence from her own experiences now, not from his approval. Something unexpected happens inside him. He begins complimenting her more often. Not strategically. Instinctively. You look nice today. I like that color on you. That dinner was incredible. Those pictures are amazing. She always smiles. Always thanks him. But she never pauses, waiting for the compliment to define her. She accepts it the way people accept sunshine. Pleasant. Appreciated. Not required for survival. That difference changes everything. It forces him to confront an uncomfortable truth. For years, he unconsciously believed she would always need him. Not because he thought she was weak. Because she had always chosen to depend on him emotionally. He confused willingness with inability. Now, he watches her thrive. She fixes problems, makes decisions, learns new skills, creates routines, finds joy, without constantly reaching back for reassurance. It's beautiful and heartbreaking, because the version of her he took for granted has quietly evolved. One afternoon, he finds an old notebook while cleaning. Inside are random grocery lists, vacation ideas, movie recommendations. Then one page catches his attention. A list written years ago. Things I want to learn. Photography, gardening, painting, cooking Thai food, hiking, learning Spanish. He remembers laughing gently when she wrote it. When are you going to have time for all that? She smiled. One day. He forgot about the notebook. She didn't. Almost every item has now been crossed off. Not because someone encouraged her every step. Because she kept showing up for herself. He sits there, holding the notebook, realizing she became the person she hoped to become. Even while he wasn't paying attention, the thought leaves him strangely emotional. How many versions of her had he missed? Simply because he assumed she'd always remain the woman who asked him what to do. That evening, she comes home carrying flowers. Wildflowers. Nothing expensive. Just a handful wrapped in brown paper. Who are those from? She smiles. I bought them. For yourself? Yeah. They're pretty. I thought so too. She trims the stems, places them in a glass vase. The kitchen instantly feels brighter. He watches quietly. Years ago, she would have waited for flowers from him. Not demanded them. Just hoped. Now, she creates beauty for herself. Without resentment. Without disappointment. Without waiting. That realization hurts more than forgotten anniversaries ever could. Because it speaks of something much deeper. a woman who has learned that the life she wants cannot depend entirely on someone else's attention. Later that night, they're sitting on opposite ends of the couch, reading. The room is peaceful, comfortable. She looks genuinely content, not performing happiness, actually feeling it. He watches her for a long moment, then looks away. A difficult truth begins forming inside him. He always believed she needed constant reassurance because she lacked confidence. Now he understands. She needed reassurance because she loved deeply. She wanted to share decisions, share excitement, share uncertainty, share life. When those moments repeatedly met distraction, she didn't stop growing. She simply learned how to grow without expecting him to witness it. Inner voice. Do you still matter to her? Yes. Then what's frightening you? That I no longer know if she needs me. The answer echoes through him. Not because love should be built on being needed, but because somewhere along the journey, he confused being essential with being emotionally present. They're not the same thing. One can exist without the other. He finally understands something that had been invisible for years. Love was never supposed to make her smaller. It was supposed to help both of them become more fully themselves. She kept growing. She kept healing. She kept discovering who she could become. The tragedy wasn't that she became independent. The tragedy was that he noticed her transformation only after she no longer required his permission to become it. As he watches her gently turn another page of her book. Calm, grounded, comfortable inside her own heart. He feels both admiration and grief. Admiration, because she has become a woman who trusts her own voice. Grief, because he cannot stop wondering how different this moment might feel if he had learned to truly see her. Before she learned she could see herself without him. When she stops reaching for him, his mind begins reaching for every version of her he failed to fully see. Memory is strange. It doesn't arrive when we're happy. It waits. Patiently. Silently. Until something is missing. Only then does it begin opening old doors. One by one. One ordinary evening. He's washing a coffee mug. The kitchen is quiet except for the sound of running water. Nothing unusual happens. No argument. No emotional conversation. Just warm water over his hands. Then, out of nowhere, he hears her laugh. Not the real one. A memory. The loud, uncontrollable laugh she used to have when she couldn't finish telling a story because she was laughing too hard. He can almost hear it echoing through the apartment. He turns instinctively. The kitchen is empty. The sound disappears. But something inside him doesn't. That is how the memory loop begins. Not intentionally. Not nostalgically. Almost involuntarily. His mind starts retrieving moments he never asked to remember. Tiny moments. The kind no one thinks to treasure while they're happening. Because everyone assumes there will always be more. He's sitting in traffic one afternoon. A yellow hatchback pulls into the lane beside him. Suddenly, he remembers the first road trip they ever took. The car had no air conditioning. The GPS kept losing signal. She insisted on creating a playlist. Half the songs were terrible. She sang every lyric anyway. Completely off-key. He teased her for hours. She laughed until tears rolled down her face. At one point she reached over, turned the music louder, and shouted, "If we're already lost, we might as well enjoy it." At the time, he rolled his eyes. Today, he would give almost anything to be lost with that version of her again. Memory never asks permission. It simply arrives. A certain perfume passes him while waiting for coffee. Immediately, he's back inside a bookstore. She had disappeared between the shelves. He pretended to be annoyed. "You're impossible to shop with." She smiled from behind a stack of novels. "You found me." I wasn't looking. Liar. She bought 2 books, neither of which she had planned to buy. He remembers carrying the bag. He doesn't remember the titles, but he remembers how naturally she slipped her hand into his. Funny. How the body remembers touch longer than the mind remembers details. At night, the memories become louder. Darkness removes distractions. There are no meetings, no errands, no notifications important enough to compete. Just him, and every version of her he forgot to appreciate. He begins scrolling through old photographs. Not because he's trying to torture himself. He tells himself he's just organizing storage, deleting duplicates, creating space. Instead, he ends up staring at a picture from 3 years ago. They're standing on a beach. Wind everywhere. Her hair completely out of control. She's laughing at something outside the frame. He's looking at the camera. She isn't. She's looking at him. He zooms in, then zooms further. How had he never noticed that? In picture after picture. She wasn't looking at the scenery. She wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at him. Waiting. Watching. Sharing the moment. He slowly swipes forward. Months pass in seconds. Somewhere, almost invisibly, her eyes begin facing the camera instead. Then the landscape. Then sunsets. Then friends. Then herself. The progression is subtle. Almost impossible to detect while living it. Painfully obvious looking backward. Inner voice. When did she stop looking at you? I don't know. Are you sure? He keeps swiping. Then stops. There it is. Not one photograph. A pattern. The camera didn't change. She did. Or maybe the direction of her attention did. The next morning, he finds an old receipt inside a jacket pocket. Movie tickets. Dated 4 years ago. He laughs softly. That terrible science fiction film she insisted they'd love. Halfway through, she whispered, "This is awful." He whispered back, "I told you." She covered her mouth to stop herself from laughing. The couple in front turned around. They apologized, then laughed even harder. He had forgotten the movie completely. But somehow, his heart remembered the laughter. The memories don't arrive in chronological order. That's what makes them impossible to escape. 1 minute, he's remembering her dancing while brushing her teeth. The next, he's remembering the way she'd automatically move closer to him whenever thunder frightened her. Then, her habit of falling asleep halfway through documentaries. The way she'd steal the blanket. The way she'd apologize to strangers even when someone bumped into her. The way she'd always wave goodbye twice. Not once. Twice. Tiny things. Ridiculous things. Beautiful things. Things he assumed would always exist. He starts recognizing something unsettling. His memories are almost never about grand romantic gestures. They're about ordinary days. Tuesday evenings. Sunday grocery shopping. Morning coffee. Then, shared silence. Burnt toast. Long checkout lines. Inside jokes. These were never the moments he believed mattered. Now, they're the only ones his heart wants back. One afternoon, he opens a drawer searching for batteries. Instead, he finds a folded piece of paper. A restaurant napkin. On it, her handwriting. A list titled, "Places we said we'd visit." 9 places. 3 have check marks. 6 remain untouched. He stares at the list. Some of those trips were delayed because of work. Some because money was tight. Some simply because they kept saying, "Next year." He traces one destination with his finger. A mountain town she'd always wanted to see in autumn. He remembers saying, "We'll have plenty of time." He believed it. She probably believed it too. At least. For a while. Memory has a cruel habit. It transforms postponed dreams into permanent questions. That weekend, a song begins playing in a supermarket. He freezes. She loved this song. Not because it was extraordinary. Because it played during their first apartment renovation. They painted the walls together. Poorly. Blue paint somehow ended up on the ceiling. She accidentally stepped into a paint tray. Left little footprints across the hallway. He pretended to be annoyed. She laughed until she cried. They ordered pizza. Sat on the floor because the furniture wasn't assembled yet. Talked about the future until 2 a.m. The cashier says, "Sir." He realizes he's standing still. The line has moved. He apologizes. B. Walks out carrying groceries. And an ache he can't explain to anyone. Inner voice. You miss her. I know. No. You miss the way you felt around her. He considers that. Then quietly shakes his head. No. I miss the version of her that believed every ordinary moment was worth sharing with me. That answer hurts even more. The memories begin changing his behavior. He drives slower past places they used to visit. He lingers outside the cafe where they had their first date. He notices the bench where she once fell asleep on his shoulder after a long walk. He passes a flower shop. Remembers buying her sunflowers because they looked too happy. She had smiled for the rest of the day. Not because of the flowers. Because he'd thought of her. How many times had he stopped doing that? Thinking of her. Without needing a reason. He starts wondering if she remembers these moments too. Or if memory belongs only to the one who realizes too late. He watches her reading one evening. She smiles faintly at something on the page. He wonders. Is she thinking about a story? Or about a life she's quietly leaving behind? He doesn't ask. He's afraid of the answer. Then something unexpected happens. The memories stop being entirely happy. New ones begin surfacing. Not joyful ones. Missed opportunities. He remembers the evening she excitedly showed him a painting she'd finished. He glanced up. Said, "Looks good." Then returned to his email. He remembers how her smile stayed on her face. Just slightly smaller. He remembers promising to look properly later. He never did. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Now, his memory refuses to let him edit it. Another memory. She came home after visiting her parents. Something was clearly wrong. He asked, "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Long enough for him to notice. Then his phone rang. "Work." He answered. By the time he finished, she had already made tea. Changed clothes. Smiled. "It's fine." He accepted that answer. Now, he wonders how many conversations disappeared inside moments like that. Not because she stopped needing comfort. Because she learned interruption was more reliable than attention. The memory loop becomes less about nostalgia and more about education. Every memory teaches him something he couldn't see while living it. The forgotten hug. The unanswered question. The postponed walk. The distracted dinner. The quick nod instead of genuine curiosity. None of them ended the relationship. But together, they slowly rewrote it. Late one night, unable to sleep, he walks into the living room. The apartment is silent. Moonlight spills across the floor. He sits on the couch where they had watched hundreds of movies together. He closes his eyes. For a brief second, he can almost hear her asking, "What should we watch tonight?" Such a simple question. One he answered absent-mindedly dozens of times. Now, he realizes she wasn't asking about movies. She was asking to spend another evening inside each other's world. He had thought the movie was the event. She had always understood. The togetherness was. He opens his eyes. The room is empty. No voices. No laughter. Only stillness. Then one final realization settles gently over him. Memory isn't punishing him. It isn't trying to make him suffer. It is showing him something his distracted heart couldn't recognize in real time. Love is rarely remembered through extraordinary declarations. It survives inside ordinary repetitions. Morning coffee. Shared jokes. Small invitations. Lingering eye contact. The instinct to turn toward someone with every beautiful thing life offers. He once believed those moments were too small to matter. Now, they are the only things he cannot stop remembering. And as the endless loop of memories continues, one truth becomes impossible to escape. He is no longer haunted by the fear of losing her. He is haunted by the growing realization that he had been living inside a beautiful love story, long before he ever understood that it was one. Sometimes the longest distance between two people is a sentence that never gets spoken. By now, he knows what is happening. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to understand that the silence between them is no longer peaceful. It is becoming permanent. Enough to realize that the woman sitting across from him every evening is no longer waiting for him to notice. Enough to admit that if something is going to change, it cannot begin with her. It has to begin with him. And for the first time in a very long time, he actually wants it to. The desire doesn't arrive dramatically. There isn't a single moment where lightning strikes and everything becomes clear. Instead, it appears in fragments. A sentence he almost says. A text he almost sends. A hand he almost reaches out to hold. Tiny acts of courage. Interrupted by something even stronger. Pride. One Tuesday afternoon. He's sitting in his office. A meeting is running longer than expected. Someone is presenting quarterly numbers. Tots. Percentages. Forecasts. Words fill the room. None of them stay in his head. His phone rests face down beside his notebook. Without thinking, he turns it over. Opens their conversation. The cursor blinks inside an empty message. He types. How's your day going? Simple. Ordinary. The kind of message she used to send him almost every afternoon. He reads it once. Then twice. His thumb hovers over the send button. Another thought immediately appears. She'll wonder why you're suddenly texting. Delete. The message disappears. He locks the phone. A minute later, he unlocks it again. The conversation is still empty. So is his chest. Pride rarely sounds arrogant. More often, it sounds reasonable. Don't bother her. She seems happy. You'll only make things awkward. If she wanted to talk, she'd text first. The voice inside him speaks calmly, almost logically, which makes it dangerous. Because fear rarely introduces itself as fear. It disguises itself as dignity. That evening, she comes home carrying groceries. He walks toward the kitchen. I'll help. She smiles. I've got it. He reaches for one of the bags anyway. Their hands brush for less than a second. Such a small thing. Yet his heart reacts as if he'd been underwater and finally reached the surface. He wants to keep holding her hand. Instead, he picks up a bag of oranges. They unpack groceries together. Quietly. She places vegetables in the refrigerator. He lines canned soup inside the pantry. Every few seconds, he thinks of something he could say. I've missed doing this with you. Remember when we used to argue about buying too many snacks? I was thinking about our first apartment today. Each sentence rises, then falls. Before it reaches his mouth, silence keeps winning. Not because silence is stronger, because speaking first feels unbearably vulnerable. Inner voice. Just say something. What if she doesn't respond? Then you'll know. What if she does? The voice pauses, then quietly asks, "Why are you more afraid of hope than disappointment?" He has no answer. That question follows him for days. Why is hope so frightening? Because hope requires exposure. To hope is to admit that something still matters. To speak is to risk hearing that you're too late. As long as he remains silent, he can still imagine every possible ending. Once he speaks, only one reality remains. Friday night. She falls asleep early. He stays awake. The glow from his phone lights the room. He opens the Notes app. Not their messages this time. A blank page. He begins writing. "I know I've been distant. Delete. I've been thinking about us lately. Delete. I don't know how to say this. Delete." He laughs softly to himself. How ironic. A man who negotiates contracts, leads meetings, makes difficult decisions every day, cannot write 3 honest sentences to the person he loves. Eventually, he stops trying to sound intelligent. Instead, he writes the truth. "I miss you." He stares at the words. They look almost embarrassingly small. Only 3 words. Yet they carry months of regret. He doesn't send them. He doesn't even save the note. He deletes it, then immediately wishes he hadn't. The next morning, they're drinking coffee in comfortable silence. She looks peaceful. She has become very good at peaceful. He studies her face. The relaxed expression. The quiet confidence. The absence of expectation. Months ago, he might have mistaken that peace for emotional distance. Now he understands something different. She is no longer fighting reality. She accepted it long before he did. That realization terrifies him. Because acceptance is much harder to reverse than anger. Angry people are still emotionally invested. Peaceful people have often finished grieving. He begins watching couples differently. At restaurants. At crosswalks. In grocery stores. A man absent-mindedly reaches over and brushes crumbs from his partner's sweater. Another couple debates which pasta sauce to buy. An elderly husband waits patiently while his wife reads every label on a jar of jam. Nothing extraordinary. Just dozens of tiny gestures. He suddenly realizes. Relationships are not maintained by declarations. They are maintained by interruptions. The constant decision to enter each other's small moments. He wonders how many of those moments he quietly walked past. Saturday afternoon. Rain begins falling. She moves onto the balcony to watch it. She has always loved rain. He knows this. She stands there with a mug of tea. Listening. Watching water collect on the railing. For several minutes. He remains inside. Looking through the glass door. Then finally, he walks outside. She glances toward him. Smiles gently. Makes room beside her. Neither of them speaks. The rain does enough talking. He wants to say, "Remember when we'd stand outside just like this?" Instead, he simply watches the rain. The silence isn't uncomfortable. It isn't intimate either. It feels like 2 people remembering different versions of the same life. Inner voice. "You're here." "I know." "Then why aren't you saying anything?" "Because if I start." "Yes." "That I don't know if I'll be able to stop." That is the truth he has been avoiding. This is no longer about one conversation. If he opens the door, everything follows. The apology. The regret. The missed years. The forgotten invitations. The countless moments he chose convenience over connection. He isn't afraid of saying, "I'm sorry." He's afraid of everything that sentence confirms. One evening, she accidentally leaves her notebook on the dining table. He isn't trying to invade her privacy. He simply recognizes it. The same notebook where she once wrote grocery lists. Dreams. Vacation ideas. He remembers how excited she used to be whenever she filled another page. He reaches toward it, then stops. His fingers hover above the cover. Slowly, he pulls his hand back. Months ago, he might have opened it without thinking. Today, he realizes something important. Love isn't proven by knowing everything. Sometimes, it's proven by respecting the parts someone no longer offers freely. He walks away. For the first time, his desire to reconnect is stronger than his curiosity. Later that night, she's reading in bed. He closes his own book. Looks toward her. She notices. What? He almost says it. Everything. Instead, he asks, "What are you reading?" She tells him. Explains the story. Talks for several minutes. He listens. Really listens. No phone. No interruptions. No drifting thoughts. Just her voice. She notices. Not immediately. Halfway through the conversation. Her eyes soften for just a moment. A flicker. Tiny. Almost invisible. It lasts less than a second. But he sees it. She still recognizes presence. Even now, when she finishes speaking, a quiet silence settles between them. Different from the others. Warmer. He realizes something. For months, he believed reconnection required grand gestures. Flowers. Trips. Long speeches. Maybe. It begins much smaller. With listening. With staying. With allowing someone to finish a sentence without mentally leaving the room. Hope returns. Carefully. Like an injured bird unsure whether it's safe to land. But pride hasn't disappeared. It simply changes shape. The next morning, he considers asking her to have dinner together. Not dinner in the apartment. An actual date. He rehearses the invitation while shaving. Would you like to go out tonight? Simple. Respectful. Honest. By breakfast. He's convinced she'll think it's strange. By lunchtime, he's convinced she'll assume he's acting out of guilt. By afternoon, he's convinced she's probably busy anyway. He never asks. That evening, she eats leftovers while reading at the kitchen table. He sits across from her, wondering how many opportunities disappear. Not because they're rejected, but because they're never offered. The realization settles painfully inside him. Pride doesn't always prevent apologies. Sometimes, it prevents invitations. The invitation to start over. The invitation to be known again. The invitation to risk hearing either yes or no. And because he says nothing, life continues exactly as before. Which is precisely the problem. Near midnight, he walks into the living room, unable to sleep. The apartment is wrapped in darkness. He sits on the couch. The same couch where the memory loop had begun days earlier. Only now, the memories have changed. They're no longer asking him to look backward. They're asking him a different question. What are you going to do tomorrow? Not yesterday. Tomorrow. Regret has taught him enough. Memory has shown him enough. Awareness has finally arrived. Only one thing remains uncertain. Action. Because understanding a broken connection and rebuilding one are two entirely different journeys. He lowers his head into his hands. For the first time, he admits something he has spent months refusing to acknowledge. He is no longer waiting for the perfect words. He is hiding behind the search for them. The truth doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be sincere. 3 simple words still echo inside him. The same 3 words he typed. Then erased. I miss you. Perhaps. He thinks. The greatest tragedy in love isn't that people stop caring. It's that they spend too long trying to sound strong. When what the relationship has been quietly waiting for all along is someone willing to sound honest. And somewhere, just beyond the walls of his pride, a conversation waits. Not guaranteed to heal everything. Not guaranteed to change the ending. But perhaps the first real conversation they have had in a very long time. In the end, it isn't the attention he longs for. It's the connection he never fully understood. For a long time, he believed he knew exactly what he was missing. He thought it was her affection, her texts, her questions, her laughter, her attention. He thought he missed being loved. That explanation feels simple, comforting. It gives him someone to blame besides himself. She stopped giving. She changed. Things aren't the same anymore. But the deeper he looks, the less convincing those explanations become. Because something inside him keeps whispering. That's not it. One Sunday morning, he wakes earlier than usual. The apartment is unusually quiet. Sunlight slips through the curtains. He hears soft music coming from the kitchen. Not loud enough to fill the room. Just enough to accompany the morning. He walks down the hallway. She's making pancakes. Not because it's a special occasion. Just because she felt like it. She notices him. Morning. Morning. Coffee's ready. Thanks. He pours himself a cup. She flips another pancake. They stand in comfortable silence. The scene is almost identical to dozens of mornings they've shared over the years. The same kitchen. The same coffee mugs. The same sunlight. The same two people. Yet somehow, everything feels different. He watches her humming quietly to herself. She's not trying to entertain him. She's simply enjoying her own morning. That realization should make him happy. Instead, a quiet ache settles inside him. Because he finally understands. He doesn't miss the pancakes. He misses being part of the reason she smiled while making them. As breakfast ends, she clears her own plate, carries it to the sink. He automatically reaches for hers. I'll wash it. She looks surprised. You don't have to. I know. She smiles softly. Thank you. Just 3 words. Polite. Warm. But somehow, he notices what isn't there. Months ago, she would have stood beside him. Dried the dishes while he washed them. Talked about nothing. A funny dream. Something she saw online. Plans for the afternoon. The dishes were never the activity. They were simply an excuse to remain close. Today, she thanks him, then quietly returns to her book. It isn't rejection. It's independence. She no longer searches for connection in places where she once naturally expected it. Inner voice. You miss her attention. No. Then what? He watches her through the kitchen doorway. She's reading near the window. Sunlight catches the edge of the pages. Completely peaceful. Finally, he answers. I miss being invited into her world. The sentence surprises even him. Because it is true. For years, she narrated her life to him. Not because she had nothing else to do. Because sharing made ordinary life meaningful. She showed him funny videos. Asked him to taste the soup before adding salt. Read paragraphs from books she loved. Pointed out oddly shaped clouds. Sent pictures of flowers. Interrupted movies to tell him random thoughts. At the time, he sometimes wished for a little more quiet. Now, the quiet is everywhere. And it feels unbearably loud. He remembers how often he responded with absent-minded words. MHM. Nice. Cool. Later. He always assumed. There would be another conversation tomorrow. He never realized. Each response was either opening a door or quietly closing one. Later that week, he's organizing old files on his computer. A folder appears. Vacation 2022. He opens it. Hundreds of photos. He expects beaches, restaurants, landmarks. Instead, most of the pictures are absurdly ordinary. Her feet hanging over a hotel balcony, half-eaten desserts, a stray cat sleeping on a scooter, his reflection in a cafe window, coffee cups, rain on glass, receipts, sunrise. He laughs softly. She really photographed everything. Then he pauses. No, not everything. Everything that meant something to her. She wasn't documenting places. She was documenting experiences. And almost every experience included him. He suddenly notices something else. There are very few pictures of himself alone. Most of them are taken from her perspective. He is reading, walking, looking at a menu, watching the ocean. Completely unaware she was photographing him. She had been quietly collecting moments, while he had been busy living through them. He closes the laptop, overwhelmed by a strange realization. She saw beauty in him, long before he learned to see beauty in what they had. That afternoon, he drives home through familiar streets. Every traffic light reminds him of another memory. Not because the places are extraordinary, because she once occupied them. The bakery where she insisted on buying bread while it was still warm. The tiny bookstore with uneven wooden floors. The park where she convinced him to feed ducks even though he thought it was childish. Back then, he participated, but rarely arrived emotionally. His body was present. His attention often wasn't. Now, his attention arrives everywhere. Only she's no longer asking him to come. One evening, she receives a phone call. It's one of her friends. He hears her laughing from the balcony, talking for nearly an hour. She tells stories, shares ideas, laughs loudly. The laugh he thought had disappeared. It hadn't disappeared at all. It had simply found places where it still felt welcomed. That thought lands gently, without accusation, without bitterness. Simply truth. He doesn't miss her laughter. He misses being someone she naturally laughed with. Inner voice. Do you wish she'd laugh less? No. Then what hurts? That she no longer needs me beside her to feel light. The answer lingers. He finally understands. The pain isn't jealousy. It's displacement. Someone who once occupied the center of her emotional life now stands quietly at the edge of it. Not because she pushed him away, because he gradually stepped out. Days pass. He keeps observing, not to analyze her, to understand himself. He notices that whenever something beautiful happens, she still turns instinctively, for a split second, then stops. One evening, a rainbow appears after a storm. She looks toward the living room, where he usually sits. Their eyes meet. She smiles, then takes out her phone, sends the picture to someone else. Maybe a friend, maybe her sister. He doesn't ask. The important part isn't who received it. The important part is that, years ago, she would have shared it with him first. Not because rainbows mattered, because sharing did. That night, he can't sleep. He walks into the spare bedroom where old boxes are stored. He isn't searching for anything specific. Just moving, thinking, remembering. He opens a cardboard box. Inside, birthday cards, movie stubs, travel brochures, an old calendar. On one page, she had written in blue ink, "Movie night with him, Red Heart." Nothing else. No expensive vacation. No major milestone. Just movie night. He sits on the floor, holding the calendar, trying to understand why that single sentence hurts so much. Then he realizes, to her, love had never been measured by extraordinary events. It had always been measured by anticipation. looking forward to being together, finding joy in ordinary plans. She didn't need luxury. She needed participation. He remembers one winter evening years ago. The power had gone out. No television. No internet. No lights. She lit candles. Made hot chocolate. Suggested they tell childhood stories until the electricity returned. He remembers thinking, this is kind of silly. But she laughed through the entire evening. Months later, she called it one of her favorite memories. At the time, he couldn't understand why. Now he can. It wasn't about candles. It wasn't about hot chocolate. It was one of the rare evenings when nothing competed for their attention. For a few uninterrupted hours, they had simply existed inside each other's company. The truth becomes impossible to avoid. He doesn't miss the romance. He misses presents. Not flowers. Not anniversaries. Not gifts. Presents. He misses the way she once believed. That every interesting thought belonged in a conversation with him. He misses being the first person she wanted to tell. The first person she looked for. The first person she turned toward when something made her smile. He misses being home. Not because they shared an address. Because they once shared attention. One evening, she accidentally drops a spoon while making dinner. It clatters loudly against the floor. Instinctively, they both bend down to pick it up. Their heads nearly bump. For a brief second, they laugh. A real laugh. Small. Natural. Unforced. The sound hangs in the kitchen. She smiles. So synchronized. Apparently. Another tiny silence follows. Different this time. Not heavy. Just open. He realizes something profound. Connection doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes, it waits quietly beneath years of distraction. Still alive. Still possible. If someone is willing to nurture it again. Later, as he lies awake beside her, he stops asking himself what he has lost. Instead, he asks a better question. What did she spend years trying to give me? The answer arrives slowly. Not admiration. Not validation. Not attention. A life. She had been offering him a front-row seat to her inner world. Every question. Every story. Every invitation. Every ordinary moment. Every. Come look at this. Every. Listen to this. Every. What do you think? Had never been about the object itself. It had always been another way of saying, come be here with me. He had mistaken those invitations for interruptions. Only after they stopped did he recognize them for what they truly were. Acts of love. As sleep slowly approaches, his heart settles into a painful but strangely peaceful understanding. He no longer misses the woman who constantly sought his attention. Because he finally sees. She wasn't asking for attention at all. She was offering connection. Again. And again. And again. Until one quiet day, she stopped offering it to someone who no longer seemed willing to receive it. And perhaps the greatest heartbreak isn't realizing that someone has changed. It's realizing that what you miss most is something they had been trying to give you all along. The deepest loss isn't when love disappears. It's when kindness remains, but it no longer belongs to you. There was a time when her softness always found him. It lived in the smallest corners of ordinary life. In the way she automatically saved the last bite of dessert because she knew it was his favorite. In the way she adjusted the blanket after he fell asleep on the couch. In the way she remembered the names of his coworkers. His mother's birthday. The kind of tea he liked when he wasn't feeling well. She carried pieces of him everywhere she went. Not because she had to. Because loving him had become one of the quiet habits of her heart. He never noticed how extraordinary those ordinary acts were. Not until they slowly disappeared. Not because she became cold. because she finally learned where to place that kindness instead. One Saturday morning, he wakes to the smell of fresh coffee. For a brief moment, everything feels familiar, almost comforting. He walks into the kitchen expecting the same old ritual. She is already there, sitting by the window, reading. A steaming mug rests beside her. She looks up. Morning. Morning. You made coffee. I did. He reaches for another mug. Pours himself a cup. The coffee tastes exactly the same. Yet something is missing. Months ago, she would have poured his cup before he walked into the room. Added just enough milk. Left it waiting exactly the way he liked it. He never asked her to. She simply remembered. Today, she remembered herself first. Not out of spite. Out of balance. He stirs his coffee slowly. And for the first time, he realizes that being cared for had once felt so normal. He had mistaken it for something permanent. People often think love ends with arguments. Doors slamming. Voices raised. Final conversations. Sometimes, love changes much more quietly. It stops anticipating someone else's needs. It stops arranging itself around another person's comfort. It returns home to the one who has been giving it away for years. Later that afternoon, they go to a neighborhood market. The streets are crowded. Vendors call out prices. Children run between stalls. Nothing unusual. As they walk, a cyclist comes around the corner too quickly. Instinctively, she steps aside. Not behind him. Beside him. Years ago, without thinking, she would have reached for his arm. Trusted him to steady her. Now, she steadies herself. The moment lasts less than 2 seconds. Yet it echoes inside him all day. It isn't about the bicycle. It's about instinct. Her instincts have changed. She no longer reaches for him first. Inner voice. Does that mean she doesn't love you anymore? He thinks carefully. No. Then what changed? She stopped depending on me to feel safe. The answer hurts. Not because independence is wrong. Because he remembers all the moments that slowly taught her she needed to build it. That evening, he notices her sewing a loose button onto her coat. He smiles. You learned how to do that. She laughs. I got tired of waiting. The sentence is innocent. She doesn't mean anything by it. Or perhaps, she doesn't realize she does. He remembers another winter years ago. She had asked him to fix that same coat. It'll only take 5 minutes. He had smiled. Tomorrow. Tomorrow became next weekend. Next weekend became forgotten. Eventually, she bought a needle. Watched a tutorial. Learned herself. It wasn't about the button. It never was. Life had quietly taught her a new philosophy. If something matters, learn to do it yourself. He begins noticing this pattern everywhere. The plants he once forgot to water. Healthy. The shelves he always promised to install. Already hanging. The recipes she once asked him to help cook. Perfected. The hiking trails she wanted to explore together. Photographed. Visited. Completed. Without him. Each accomplishment makes him proud. And breaks his heart. Because every achievement carries a hidden sentence. I waited. Then I adapted. Days later, his coworker asks a simple question during lunch. How's your wife? He smiles automatically. She's doing well. The answer is true. Painfully true. She's doing well. She's sleeping better. Laughing again. Reading more. Taking photographs. Meeting friends. Trying new things. Growing. He used to think his greatest fear was losing her happiness. Now, he discovers something more complicated. She found happiness. She simply stopped needing him to create it. Driving home. He realizes how strange love can be. He always wanted her to become confident, independent, peaceful. He just never imagined those beautiful qualities might one day grow in directions that no longer required him. One rainy evening, the electricity flickers, then disappears. Darkness fills the apartment. Years ago, she would have laughed, lit candles, suggested board games, turned an inconvenience into an adventure. Tonight, she calmly takes a flashlight from the drawer, continues reading, almost as though nothing happened. He watches her, then quietly lights a candle anyway. She glances up, smiles. That's nice. Just 3 words. Kind, gentle, grateful. But she doesn't put down her book. She doesn't come sit beside him. She doesn't need the candle to create closeness anymore. She has already learned how to keep herself company. He sits alone beside the flickering flame, watching shadows move across the walls. He suddenly understands. Her softness never disappeared. It simply changed direction. It used to flow toward him naturally. Now, much of it flows inward, toward her own healing, toward her own peace, toward the parts of herself she neglected while trying to keep both of them emotionally connected. Inner voice. Are you angry? No. Jealous? No. Then what are you feeling? He watches the candle burn lower. Grief. For what? He answers without hesitation. For the version of her that believed I would always meet her halfway. The realization settles with astonishing clarity. He has spent months believing he missed the woman she used to be. But perhaps she never stopped being that woman. She simply stopped extending the parts of herself that repeatedly found empty space. Kindness, like water, flows where it is welcomed. If a river keeps meeting closed gates, eventually, it finds another path. One Sunday afternoon, they're cleaning the apartment together. She is dusting bookshelves. He is organizing storage boxes. He finds an old scarf. Soft gray wool. He smiles. You love this scarf. She looks over. I still do. You stopped wearing it. It reminds me of a different season. She says it casually, without sadness, without resentment. Just a fact. He runs the fabric through his fingers. He realizes. Objects don't simply hold memories. People decide whether to continue living inside them. She had gently folded away entire emotional seasons. Not because she hated them, because she had survived them. That evening, they sit on opposite ends of the couch, watching the rain. No television. No phones. Just rain. For the first time in months. He chooses not to fill the silence with regret. Instead, he speaks honestly. I've been thinking. She turns toward him. I know I wasn't really here. She doesn't interrupt. I thought providing was enough. Still, she says nothing. I didn't realize how many small moments I kept missing. The room remains quiet. Rain taps softly against the windows. Finally, she speaks. I know. Only 2 words. Not accusing. Not forgiving. Simply true. He waits. She continues. I tried to show you for a long time. He lowers his eyes. I know. Another silence. Different now. Not empty. Not resolved. Just honest. He wants to ask the question that has haunted him for weeks. Is it too late? But he doesn't. Because for the first time, he understands something important. Some questions are asked because we genuinely seek an answer. Others, because we're hoping someone else will remove the responsibility of living with uncertainty. She cannot tell him whether tomorrow is possible. Only tomorrow can. Instead, he asks something smaller. Something real. Would you like to have coffee with me tomorrow morning? Not because coffee matters, because showing up does. She studies him quietly, then nods. I'd like that. Nothing dramatic happens. No tears. No embrace. No cinematic music. Just one simple invitation. Accepted. That night, he lies awake, listening to the rain, thinking about everything he has learned. He understands now that love rarely collapses because of one terrible mistake. It erodes through thousands of unnoticed absences. And if that is true, perhaps healing cannot arrive through one magnificent apology either. Perhaps it is rebuilt the same way it was lost. One morning, one conversation, one invitation, one fully present moment at a time. As dawn slowly approaches, he walks to the window. The rain has stopped. The streets glisten beneath the first light of morning. Behind him, he hears her quietly moving through the apartment, preparing for another ordinary day. He smiles to himself. Not because everything has been repaired. It hasn't. Not because he knows how their story ends. He doesn't. But because something inside him has finally changed. For so long, he believed love was something another person continued giving, no matter how little attention it received. Now he understands. Love is less like a possession, and more like a garden. Ignore it long enough, and even the richest soil begins to harden. But if there is still life beneath the surface, if there is still one green root reaching toward the light, then every gentle act of presence becomes another drop of rain. He doesn't know whether the garden they once shared will bloom again. That choice no longer belongs to him alone. But at last, he knows the difference between wishing for flowers and learning how to care for them. And perhaps that is where every real love story truly begins. Not at the moment two people find each other, but at the quiet moment when one finally understands. That love was never hidden inside the grand declarations. It had always been waiting, inside the ordinary moments, that seemed too small to lose, until they were gone.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.